You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Police Board meeting, open session, February 17th, 2021. With apologies for those of you who have been waiting for this meeting to start. We had a lot to cover. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. So welcome everyone. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none, we have consent agenda items 7.1 through 7.14. Does anyone have any questions or comments or wants any one of those items pulled from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to move the consent agenda items. It's moved by Rosita, seconded by Carl. All those in favor, please indicate. Everybody's got their cameras on so I can count hands. That's great. That is carried. Colleagues, there was a delegation on the agenda item, but after discussion, it was deemed that the subject matter that the delegation was going to speak of is actually an operational matter. And as we all know, under the Police Services Act, operational matters are the purview of the chief. So we will be contacting the delegation to let them know that they can send their input on the Ipsos Reid survey in writing to the chair or to the chief. And they're also welcome to contact Ms. Mark Blode, who has a great deal of expertise in that matter if they want to provide some input. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. There's correspondence that was attached. Any comments or questions about those? I think you've received them all electronically. It's part of your package. Seeing none, they're provided for information. We have delegation of authority, and I would look to Ms. Eggleton to speak to this.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, members of the board. This item is coming back to the board again this month and is in response to the board approving a motion at the April 2020 board meeting, delegating its authority to the chair and vice chair during the pandemic, and providing a mechanism for decision-making on board-related items for urgent matters that might come up in between regular scheduled board meetings. The approved delegation of authority was time-limited and would be repealed by the board once no longer required. So it's coming back again to the board again today to confirm if the board wishes to keep the mechanism in place or to repeal. Just to note, since the motion was passed, the board chair and vice chair have not been required to exercise this delegation of authority.
Do we have a motion to continue for another month with this delegation of authority? Moved by Ian, seconded by Karen. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next agenda item is the strategic business plan update. And Chief, do you want to kick this off?
Well, thanks very much, Chair Redmond, and good morning, members of the board. We have an aggressive agenda ahead of us, and so happy February to all of you. I'm just going to actually turn it over to Miss Margaret Glode and Miss Amanda Francini, as well as Miss Jill Eggleton, who have been doing some significant work on preparing the strategic business plan, and appreciate every consistent work and feedback, as well as the development. So over to you, Margaret. Good morning.
Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the board, and Chief. Thank you for this opportunity to take you through the draft 2021-2023 new strategic business plan. As you all know, it's been a great collaborative effort getting to this point. Work with the board, with help from consultants, our senior leaders, and our staff as well, most specifically Amanda Francisini, who's been the strategic planner assigned to this portfolio, who, as you know, has done a fabulous job. So we're at a critical point here, a great milestone where we're looking at the draft plan and getting ready to embark on pursuing these important priorities. But just with that quick intro, I'm going to pass it over to Amanda just to walk you through this board report and the goals and objectives that have been drafted since you had your last update.
Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Good morning. I wanted to highlight that there's a lot of background that goes into the strategic business plan. So as Mark mentioned, the content covers the legislative policing functions. So we've made sure to address community patrol, community satisfaction with services, assistance to victims, property crime, emergency calls for service, youth crime, violent crime, road safety, criminal investigations, and crime prevention. So that content is covered within the goals and objectives. And it's also been informed by statistical trends, our internal and external scanning, regional stakeholders, etc. Furthermore, every goal fits under one or more of the board's pillars, so we're staying true to the strategic framework set by the board. Now, our operationalizing was not organized based on any particular area of the service owning any one goal or objective. So as our senior leaders collaborated, there were some goals that were shared across areas of the service, ideas across branches, and the objectives underneath could be contributions from more than one area. So that looks a little different this time around. We've kept our goals to 20, making sure to, again, include all of the above and prioritize. Under the theme of our members, we have a goal to help our members thrive at work and to keep our members psychologically and physically well. So you'll see as we get into the objectives, that's more specific. And what you don't see in this plan as it stands at the moment are the even more specific layers under the objectives. So there are still a lot of actions and a lot of steps that will go into achieving those objectives that contribute to the higher goal. So just know that that will be in the works beyond today and will be even more reflective of some of the actions that our members and our community wanted to see. We also have a theme of nurturing learning and potential. So we want to promote a culture of learning and nurture potential. This also brings us into a big theme of equity, inclusion, and diversity. We want to advance the goals of the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Strategic Plan, and we've specifically named their pillars underneath that as our objectives as well. Our service also wants to focus upstream, so we have a goal to invest in enhanced upstream community safety and well-being and crime prevention initiatives. Of course, road safety being both legislated and important to our community, we want to enhance road safety. Under the theme of victim support, we want to reduce incidents and support victims of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Under the theme of reducing crime, our goal is to decrease violent and property crime. Under the theme of customer service, we want to offer a consistent, quality customer service experience. In terms of communications, we have a goal to adapt our public communication on policing topics to meet community needs. We also want to enhance transparent and timely communication with our members. And there was a large theme of increasing capacity within our service. So there are several ideas to develop organizational resilience and maximize capacity. In terms of technology and efficiencies, our goal is to leverage technology and adopt innovative practices to provide modernized and effective service delivery. Under the theme of transparency through data, Goal 14 is to increase transparency and community trust using data and technology. In terms of evidence-based policing practices, decision-making, and evaluation, we have a number of goals. One of them is to enhance data governance initiatives. We also want to use timely, accurate, and relevant information to support informed decision-making and accountability across the organization. We want to evaluate operational and investigative initiatives. We want to cultivate an organization that coordinates projects, resources, and initiatives for effective change management. And we want to improve member understanding and accountability of organizational policies and procedures. Lastly, under the theme of facilities, we want to provide safe, accessible, and welcoming facilities that meet operational needs. So within those 20 goals, you'll see all of the objectives get more specific, and you'll see within some of those even other references to strategies and plans. And we want our members to see that every area is reflected within these 20 goals, and for our community to also see their input reflected in the development of these goals and objectives. Although some goals and objectives, again, are legislated time and time again, there may be some goals and objectives that sound familiar, but how we accomplish those are shaped by current issues. So at this time, I'll again open it up for discussion. Marg, if you have anything to add from our office or if there's any questions.
Well, I want to thank you for a very comprehensive strategic business plan, and I think that the board has felt very involved all the way along and very much in tune with the development. So it's nice to see the end product. Tony, do you have a question or a comment? Go ahead.
It's a quick question through you, Madam Chair, for Amanda or for Marg. The actual 20 points, you indicated under each one of those there would be more specific initiatives, to deliver or to reach those goals. Will they be using SMART criteria, number one, as to achievable, specific, measurable, and how do you foresee this being reported as to success rates as you go through this process with these initiatives?
Yeah, so our intent is indeed to use the SMART goal setting. We still have to develop the performance indicators, which are those specific, measurable, actionable, and timely features. Create positions accountable so that there will be a point person that will indeed report on the progress, as well as develop the timelines. And I expect that we would continue to use our online reporting tool that's an internal web-based solution for having these positions accountable, provide short blurbs on a monthly basis, ideally in direct reference to the SMART criteria. And that can be produced as a report at any time. And that is what we have been using to report on whether an objective or a goal has been completed. That was used in the past cycle.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great question, Tony. Any further questions? Colleagues, this is the first time we're seeing the goals and objectives. I'm not sensing a great deal of feedback at this juncture or amendments. So we sort of have two options. We can bring it back updated to the March Police Services Board meeting for final approval, or if there are no changes or if they're minimal, the board may choose to wish to approve the plan at today's meeting. So we are in your hands. Does the board wish to approve this strategic business plan at this juncture or revisit it in March. It seems to me that nobody has major concerns or amendments, so I would think that we could approve it today, but it's up to the board. Tony, go ahead.
I would put a motion forward to approve. It seems in line with our discussions. As you said, we've been intimately involved in this process, so I would put a motion forward to approve it at this point.
That's great. And Sandy, you're seconding it, or do you have a comment as well? And both.
I would second it, and also a comment that it's great. There's been some really excellent work done on this. I know I expect that the community is going to wish for some more detail in some of the areas, and particularly equity, inclusion, and diversity. Those are all really good goals and objectives for us to get to. But you know, how we support total community engagement, etc., will be a key thing. And I don't know, Chief, if you want to speak to any of that now, or if it'll just come out, you know, as things unfold.
Chief, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Mayor Shantz, and through you, Chair Redmond. First, want to acknowledge and thank the board for all your excellent feedback. And I am hopeful that you're actually seeing the fruition of your feedback and dialogue embedded within the document, combined with internal feedback from our members, as well as our senior leaders, as well as the many community town hall sessions, as well as the surveys that we hosted publicly. I think that this process has been a delight. It's been a very collaborative, collegial approach. So yes, you know, obviously we will, you know, make the document. We have a full communication plan outlined as well in the report. I think one of the key lessons learned from previous years is how do we communicate exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. So you'll see that in there, Mayor Shantz. And so the intent would be to come back to board exactly as I think comments have said around what are the full further objectives, evaluations, matrices, outputs and outcomes that are expected, as well as even a return on investment piece. Those will be coming forward and the work will continue. We wanted to solidify that the board was very comfortable with the strategic direction around specific goals, as well as the key objectives. And it sounds like we have consensus. So now our team can pull together in partnership with Ms. Eggleton from the board, key indicators, key performance pieces. And one of the pieces that we've committed to in our communication plan is also coming back to the board biannually to update the board on progress, where we're at, if there's any strategic flags, any delays in process based on what's currently, you know, within the climate. I think we learned during the pandemic, you can have great plans and then all of a sudden you're on a different firefighting mission and some of those plans are put on hold, et cetera. So I think that we've learned some resilience and how to be a little more agile as an organization, but really delighted with where we've come. I do think that when we share this provincially and with the Solicitor General's office, the work that we've done will be a highlight provincially for the ministry to see the amazing work that is being done both by the board from a governance perspective, as well as by the service, but in partnership and in collaboration with our community. So very excited to return back to the board with the finer details you know, I don't want to put any pressure here. We have a short turnaround to the March meeting, so likely you'll probably April that you'll see the more finer details.
Thank you. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you. And Mayor Shantz took away some of my comments just because I noted when I was looking at, I'm going to call them goals underneath themes, that there's a bit of a disparity between, we have some very, very broad ones and we've got some very, very specific ones. And so I echo what she said. I think there's a need for some of the ones that are very broad. For example, theme 10 communication. You know, we're talking about utilizing a variety of communication mediums to increase reach. I mean, that's just, it's very broad without saying specifically what it is we'll be doing. So I would just echo what she said and suggest that there's sort of a similar level of detail and specificity related to all of the goals that we're looking at. And again, what Tony was talking about related to it, and the chief answered my question before I asked it, related to accountability measures in terms of how are we tracking that. So if we are falling behind, hopefully this won't be the issue, but if we are falling behind, you know, what, additional resources, what else needs to be done in order to make sure they're achieved.
So we have a mover and a seconder, and I would just like to, before we take the vote, really commend this board. You've invested a lot of time, both in our strategic planning sessions as well as individual meetings with groups of people in the community who saw gaps in policing and heard firsthand their concerns, their challenges, and their wants. So I think this board has a huge investment in ownership from a governance perspective, and we do look forward to see this as it unfolds. And again, many thanks to Amanda, Marg, and to Jill for animating this process. I think this board is very committed to it. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. We look forward to having it coming back and some of that information filled in. Chief of Police reports. Chief, wellness update is the first one.
Thanks very much, Chair Redmond. And we have a series of updates, in fact, 8 updates in I said a heavy agenda. We have a number of annual reports, but the first one is really built on some ongoing work that with the support of this Police Services Board, we started about 6 years ago as a part of my tenure and the organizational change around focusing on wellness. There's been a number of pieces that have happened within the organization, within our profession, that require significant attention to our wellness. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Staff Sergeant Elizabeth Houston. Beth is joining us. She's our wellness coordinator and works in partnership with Miss Carrie Hall, along with our human resources team. And I just can't say enough about the level of care and compassion and hard work that has been ongoing. Beth is our second official wellness coordinator. Our first was Staff Sergeant Dean Smith, who sort of set the foundations. And Beth and Carrie have been building on those foundations to what internally we've dubbed Wellness 2.0. And I do think that the board saw significantly in internal feedback, almost a significant jump in organizational commitment to wellness and almost a significant resounding support for changes in the work that we've been doing. It's hard work, it's challenging work, it's addressing stigma, and it's tied to external impacts as well. But I'm going to turn it over to Staff Sergeant Beth Houston, who will also take you through and really formulates and forms part of the strategic business plan for the next 3 years, our Wellness 2.0 plan. So good morning and welcome, Beth. Good to see you.
Good morning, Chief. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Redmond and members of the board. I'm going to try and share my screen here and see if this works. Can you guys see that?
We can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we appreciate the opportunity to come and share some updates regarding some of the work that we're doing on the wellness front within the wellness unit with you. Our wellness unit was established in 2017, and since that time we continue to evolve so we can develop programming which meets the needs of our members. The unit consists of myself, as the Chief mentioned, and my partner in wellness, Carrie Hall, who is our wellness coordinator. The graphic on this slide identifies our areas of focus. However, each one of these quadrants contains many different pieces of work. Within education and awareness, I'd like to highlight our work, our efforts at presenting to all new employees during new employee orientation, as well as the corresponding family night. Our efforts to educate during new or in-service training sessions, as well as new supervisor and field development officer courses. Under support and referral would include work such as critical incident support for members, EFAP referrals and support, as well as availability on myself and Carrie's part for drop-in appointments and visits, as well as after-hour supports. Under programming, we would have the peer support program, which Carrie and I oversee, as well as our annual wellness check-in program and safeguarding programs. In there as well would be our fitness classes, testing, pin testing, recruit fitness, as well as fitness counseling for all members. Lastly, in intervention, this sort of work would include things such as dealing with emergency situations involving members as they arise, daily incident review, building our in-house psychological services program. In 2020, we were tasked with developing several new strategies to provide the service and the wellness unit with direction and priorities that we could focus our attention on going forward. So we've developed 4 new strategies as a result. We have the overall wellness strategy, which is a 3-year plan, a suicide prevention strategy, physical health and fitness, as well as a COVID-19 wellness strategy in response to the ongoing pandemic. Although each of these strategies is standalone and unique, they all have a common thread which runs through them, and that is the concept of resilience. Resilience is not something which we innately possess, but rather a skill set which can be developed and built over time. It speaks to our ability to withstand adversity and recover from the challenges we face in our lives and careers. This career is not without impact. In our wellness world, we often say it is not if something will catch up with you, it is when. So by developing strategy and programming which helps our members continue to build their own personal resilience, they are more likely to be able to deal appropriately with difficult circumstances they may face, stay healthy, and stay at work. So here we have a brief overview of the overall wellness strategy and some of the components that are included within it. To highlight a couple of pieces on this graphic, at the top we have enhanced family support. We are firm believers that we need to be developing and building a comprehensive network of family support to help family members understand what resources and help are available for them as well. We know that often the first people who are going to recognize when we are struggling is our family at home. We try to educate our members about all of our available resources, but if a member chooses not to share that information with their family, then at times family members may not know what help is available. So we want to make connections with the families to ensure that they never are left wondering who to call and what to do when they need support. We also would like to formalize what we're calling our network of wellness champions. We already have some amazing people within our organization who are informal go-tos, sources of information, guidance, and support for members who may be struggling. This is fantastic, and it already speaks to the resilience of some of our members, but we want to formally identify who these people are so we can come up with initiatives to best use the incredible power of their lived experiences that they're willing to share. But more importantly, we want to be able to protect them and ensure their wellness is supported as they provide invaluable support for our members. And if we jump across the graphic to leveraging technology, we're looking into mental health support apps to provide resources to our people and their families 24/7 when they need the most, because we all know struggles don't just happen during business hours. The service is also researching business intelligence tools, and most of these tools already would have wellness related capabilities built in, which we will tap into to create additional layers of coverage and screening to ensure our members don't fall through the cracks. As well, we will continue to take advantage of improved communication tools such as the WRPS Express and WRPS TV to push out our messaging to members. The overall strategy also includes pieces of several of the other strategies I have already mentioned. These strategies have been great foundation pieces, but we know nothing ever stays the same for very long. So the COVID-19 wellness strategy has been shifting and evolving in response to the pandemic. At the crux of it, though, is continued support and contact with our members to ensure they are well informed and that they have the appropriate wellness resources available to them. The work from home strategy has evolved between the first and second waves to now allow for a rotational schedule. Among other reasons, this was to help foster employee connection and engagement as people were away from the physical workplace. Although the rotation stopped with the second state of emergency, it is back up and running again as of next week. So again, highlighting the fact that this strategy really has needed to remain a fluid document. We are learning and changing course appropriately when required. Carrie and I have tasked members of the Wellness Committee to be our voices within the various workspaces, to engage with colleagues, to ask about what's needed. Is there anything missing? This continues to be a standing committee agenda item for us, but we have heard very positive feedback. Through continued engagement with members, we're helping to build an environment where people feel their voices are heard and valued. We are extremely pleased that our fitness facilities reopened yesterday, much to the relief of our entire membership. However, I really would like to highlight the excellent job done by my partner, Carrie. Throughout the pandemic, she created a vast library of alternative resources for our members to tap into when the gyms were available. So we did have supports in place for members if they chose to use it. In September of 2019, the expert panel on police officer deaths by suicide released a written report titled Staying Visible, Staying Connected for Life. This report was prompted by 9 deaths of Ontario police officers by suicide in 2018. It was very apparent that law enforcement as a profession needed to take action and have a strong proactive stance on suicide prevention. This strategy clearly outlines the need for collaboration and guidance from mental health professionals to ensure our members are educated and can recognize the warning signs and take immediate action when required. There are 3 phases of this strategy: prevention, which would include pieces such as efforts aimed at dismantling stigma, our annual wellness check-in program, as well as safeguarding, our in-house psychological services program, enhanced family supports, and education and training, just to name a few. Intervention would include education for all members to enhance recognition of warning signs, provide them with steps to take, and ensure they have the resources available for support. And as well, we'll speak to having all mid-leaders and senior leaders receive specific training regarding suicide prevention and intervention. And lastly, post-vention efforts need to include providing comprehensive bereavement support for survivors, colleagues, and friends. And as well, we believe there needs to be a formal review to be conducted in all member deaths by suicide. One other piece we'll be looking at is finding appropriate means to honor those who have died by suicide. When we originally wrote this strategy, the physical health and fitness strategy back in the fall of 2020, it was developed as a fitness strategy. However, after reviewing the Ipsos survey results, the need for more was quite clear, and we're already putting our minds to amending this strategy and evolving it. And we've already renamed it the physical health and fitness strategy, as opposed to our previous focus, which was solely fitness, From the survey results, we have seen some very impressive improvements within the last 6 years in terms of wellness supports. However, we did note there are opportunities for improvement in such areas such as nutrition support, meditation, requests for better access to gyms and workout spaces, among other things. So there is work to be done in these areas, and now Carrie and I have the job of identifying exactly what this looks like and how we make it happen. We've already confirmed through our Homewood EFAP benefits that there are some supports already available in terms of these items. Homewood does provide both nutritional counseling through their Life Smart coaching program, and also offers a 30-day program called Jumpstart Your Wellness, aimed at establishing healthy habits. However, I do expect that information and support and resources pertaining to nutrition, meal planning, and shift work might also be a valuable support for us to offer our members. So this is something we're going to be looking into. One of our overall goals is to engage more members in physical activity and to participate in the PIN testing program. These things can help serve as preventative measures for improved physical health and mental well-being. We will be creating an incentive program for people who attempt and are successful at obtaining the fitness PIN. As well, built into the strategy is a nature walking trail here at headquarters aimed at providing members with a safe option for outdoor physical fitness. And additionally, we will continue to provide service-wide information campaigns regarding physical health and overall wellness-related topics. So that is a very high-level view, or a very high-level overview of our work. We are very, very proud of the work that we do and the authentic connections that we're able to make with many of our members. Our aim really is to weave wellness into every part of the organization and continue the conversations. We look forward to continued opportunities to grow and evolve so we can best support our people. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of our work with you today.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant Houston. It's very impressive. I guess a couple of things that struck me, I don't see any hands, so I'll talk in case some hands come up, but is the fact that this started in 2017, and somehow I find it remarkable that it hasn't been there longer than this, and to have something this sophisticated and this sort of all-encompassing in a short amount of time is really impressive. You talked about the family night, and it's always struck me that being in policing, whether you're a uniform or a civilian person, is really choosing a way of life. It's not just an occupation, it is a profession and a way of life. And I'd never heard the expression post-vention before, but it clearly speaks to the fact that you're looking holistically at the staff of Waterloo Regional Police Services and their families. So all of that's encouraging, as well as you've already responded to the Ipsos survey, which is really great to see that information being implemented. I think the chief has said to me on several occasions that closing that gym down during the pandemic was probably one of the most contentious things that he had to face. So
Absolutely.
good to hear that you're back and up and operating. I don't see any other comments, just to commend you on staying current and being so ambitious in this plan. Chief, back to you.
Thanks so much, Chair Edmund, and thank you so much, Beth and Carrie and the entire peer support team and all the amazing wellness committee members that have put it at the forefront. And they're doing amazing work, and we're well served with the leadership of Beth and Carrie, including all those involved. So it's really been a great organizational impact. And I look forward to supporting, in particular, the physical health and fitness regime as Deputy Hilton puts pressure on both Deputy Crowell and I to up our game. So look forward to that. I'll keep moving through the board reports. The next one is the 2021 Waterloo Regional Police Service organizational chart. Chair Redmond, there is a recommendation that the Waterloo Regional Police Service Board approve the 2021 Waterloo Regional Police Service organizational chart. This is really somewhat of a formality, but I think moving forward will be an annual process. One of the things we recognize that policing is evolving and changing significantly, particularly how crime trends change and move. And based on the work that has been done within our organization, we really recognize that from time to time, we need the ability and the agility to move resources across the organization. Superintendent Fenton and Inspector Bond and Inspector McBride have significantly restructured our investigative services to meet the changing landscape of crime in our community. And one of the challenges is moving boxes, moving people, and looking at authorized strength. And of course, as the board is aware, we've made a number of enhancements in the administrative and member services as well, with the launch of a new division, the professional development division, that would see training and professional standards pulled together, but also launch our Respect in the Workplace portfolio. And as well as on the operational side, the whole launch and renewal of neighborhood policing to meet the changing dynamics. What the organizational chart brings together is the structure of how we're laid out, so our community understands who we are and how we do business and how everything is linked. It's also within the envelope of our 2021 approved operating budget of 1,152 members, funded positions, 794 sworn members, and 358 civilian professionals. And again, this is something that from time to time where we reviewed our organizational chart, there's times where internally we've made changes yet have not come to the board. And we felt that this was a good formalized process. Throughout 2020, we had been coming consistently with organizational changes. So subject to any questions, this is really a compliance piece to have the board and formally approve the organizational chart. But the intention would be year to year. We would review our structure, and look at our current envelope of funding, look at our allotment and assignment, and come to the board in likely December or January for formal approval. So subject to any questions, it's over to you, Chair Redmond.
Thank you very much, Chief. And that expression, form follows function. And I think that the reorganization of the service is a real statement to the values and to modernizing. So I really commend you. Councillor Kiefer.
I'm moving it.
Thank you. Moved by Carl, seconded by Karen. That is great. I see no other speakers. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. That is carried. Thank you. Annual Report 2020, Chief and Public Complaint Statistics. Chief, do you want to introduce this one?
Sure. Thanks so much, Chair Redmond and members of the board. I'm pleased to welcome Inspector Sloden Lakovic, who oversees our professional standards branch. He's online, and I'll turn it over to Deputy Crowell to introduce Sloden and an introduction into the report.
Thank you, Chief, Chair Redmond, members of the board. Very pleased to invite Inspector Lakovic to provide an overview of all the complaints filed with our service in a number of different avenues throughout 2020. He'll present statistics that provide an overview really of the last 3 years in context of the 2020 statistics. Over to you, Inspector.
Thank you, Deputy. Good morning again, Chair Redmond, members of the board, chief, deputies, and fellow senior leaders. I'm going to give you a brief overview of our 2020 annual report on chiefs and public complaints. We didn't see a significant increase over the previous year's numbers, and in most categories, we're around our 3-year average. But please consider, we had over 280,000 calls for service last year and 785 sworn members. Our chief complaints rose from 27 in 2019 to just 33 in 2020. This is just slightly higher than our average of 27. Red light infractions rose from 3 to 6 in 2020. Again, this is right around our 3-year average. Of the completed chief complaints and red light infractions, 9 have been substantiated, 5 were unsubstantiated, and 25 are still under investigation. The most common type of misconduct complaint was discreditable conduct, followed by insubordination. Now I'll take you to public complaints. And in respect to public complaints, we treat each and every one very seriously. And we take the approach that every single complaint is a new opportunity for us to build a bridge or repair a bridge. Last year, we had 57 screened in public complaints, just up 7 from 2019. Our 3-year average is around 58.7, and the majority of complaints also were focused around discreditable conduct. The number of complaints the OIPRD screened out rose actually from 58 to 88 last year. We've completed 43 of the 57 screened in complaints, and of those, only 1 was substantiated. Further, and this goes to the testament of the investigators that spend a lot of time making sure they do good, thorough investigations and properly speak and cooperate and communicate with the complainants. Of all the complaints, only 2 complainants requested a review of our findings, and the OIPRD has held 1 of our findings, and we're still waiting on their decision on the 2nd. We had 51 contact sheets, just up from 40, and currently we have 14 Police Service Act hearings in progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no questions. I actually have one. How does the public go about launching a complaint? Is that something they'd find on the website?
Yes, Chair Redmond, it is. There's several ways they can launch a complaint. They can walk into a division, speak with the on-duty staff sergeant, launch a complaint. They can phone us, of course, launch a complaint. Some even choose to contact the chief's office and begin a complaint that way. It comes down to us and we would file it for them. Additionally, they can go online and file complaints that way. So there's several ways a member of the public can launch a formal public complaint.
Thank you for that. Tony Giovanasso, go ahead, Tony.
Through you, Madam Chair. I just had one quick question. Under the public complaints, allegations of discreditable conduct, as well as unnecessary exercise of authority, like the percentage jump seemed to be, at least in my perception, significant, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Are they significant? Is it a trend that is seen widely across police services around Ontario or Canada? If you could just talk about those increases or year over year, sorry.
Thanks for that question. And, it all looks at how we categorize it. And I'll be honest, this year was the first year that we started connecting with other services, about 4 or 5, to see how they're capturing their complaints and their statistics. And I think what we want to do is for next year, categorize our complaints and break them down a little bit better so we have some specifics as to what we're seeing. And if we understand what the specifics are, then maybe there's an opportunity for us to take some of that data and use that to prevent some of these complaints from ever occurring. If we know what's going on and if we know what's driving complaints, then we might be able to communicate that to our members and prevent complaints. And I'd love to in the future see a reduction in the number of public complaints we receive.
Tony, any further comments? Okay, thank you very much for this report. And I always think it's great to have a baseline and sort of do year over year. And it's wonderful to hear about the refinements that are being projected. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
And again, Chief, back to you.
Thanks, Chair Redmond. Just some closing comments. I want to thank Inspector Lakovic and his team of investigators for their professionalism. Obviously, they have a difficult role within the police service, where they often deal with those that are not, pleased with the level of service and or the conduct of our members, but equally they also deal with challenging internal matters which may require discipline. So we're very impressed by Sloden and his team for the fine work that they do. And also, I think when we look at the 3-year average, particularly in the current climate we're in, I still continue to see that every single day, more than 800 calls a day, that over 1 million interactions a year, the level of concern and or complaint about our investigators, as well as our service from a policy and process perspective remains certainly intact. And that, can indicate a high level of and a significant level of support for policing and or trust and confidence. So thanks to the team for that. I'll keep moving through the reports as we deal with the agenda. Next, I'm pleased to welcome Inspector Jason Voucher of our Training and Education branch for the semi-annual and annual use of force statistics, the third and fourth quarter of 2020, as well as the annual update. And as the board is aware, and we've actually progressed this to a quarterly report moving into 2021. So you'll see us back in April as we begin to look at how we actually continue to use and trace and track force, including race-based data collection, which has been mandated by the Solicitor General's office, which we fully support and continue to work with the province. So over to Deputy Crowell for an introduction, but welcome Inspector Voucher.
Thank you, Chief. I'm happy to introduce Inspector Jason Voucher from our Training and Education unit. This is really a continuation of the last board report, which gives a snapshot of the 2020 statistics. He'll give an overview that puts in context relative year to year, the trends that we're seeing and the refinements that we're making and to modernize this reporting to the board and to the public. So over to you, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy, and good afternoon, Chair Redmond and members of the board. And I also want to acknowledge Jill for assisting me in my slide deck here. So Jill, if we could just proceed to the next slide, please. You're going to notice that the presentation I'm going to deliver to you today is very similar to that I delivered several months ago, with the exception of some updated data. I think, however, it's important that I update and refresh your memory on some very specific items with relation to this report. Period of reporting is from July 1st to December 31st of 2020. And again, this is the first year, 2020 was the first year in totality that we collected race-based data. Remember as well that reportable incidents are those incidents that require use of force report either by legislation, so the Policing Standards Act, or Waterloo Region Police procedure. We actually, in the interest of transparency and in more thorough analysis of our use of force incidents, the number of use of force reports that we gather is significantly higher than is required by the Police Services Act. And I'll give you an example of that is the withdrawal of tasers, which we'll talk about in a little bit. A reportable incident is an incident that may generate several use of force reports. So as an example, if we have an incident whereby multiple officers show up to a particular occurrence, and each of those officers draws a use of force option or uses a use of force that meets that threshold, each of them would be required to complete a report. The exception to this is for team reports that would apply to things like our emergency response team. And again, to refresh on this, each use of force report is subject to 3 layers of scrutiny, and that is to determine whether or not the officer's actions were appropriate and consistent with procedure and law. First off, the staff sergeant of the platoon of the unit reviews the report. It then goes to the senior leader of the unit or division. And then finally, a use of force sergeant in training and education reviews that report. This slide summarizes use of force reports and incidents for 2020 relative to the last 4 years prior to that. One of the things you'll notice is of 146,629 occurrences in the latter half of 2020, and with 5,404 arrests. This decreased over previous years, and in fact, reversed the trend that we'd seen over the last several years of an increased occurrences year over year. We speculate, I think with great confidence, that this likely has to do with COVID, the COVID pandemic, and the associated public health measures. The graphic on the right-hand side, the pyramid on its side, represents the fact that of those 146,629 occurrences, we in fact had 143 use of force incidents. And I believe this is a testament the small number is a testament to how well our members apply de-escalation. I'll also draw your attention to the pie chart that you would have seen in the last report as well too. This indicates that 93% of incidents in which use of force reporting was required came from either citizen-generated calls for service, warrants, or an assisting of other agencies. Of the totality of occurrences in the latter half of 2020, only 7% of those were in fact officer initiated. And this pie chart looks almost identical to what we found in the first half of the year, where officer initiated calls requiring use of force were in fact only 8%. Moving to the next slide, please. What this indicates are the call type to which use of force was required. So like the first half of 2020, dangerous weapons calls drove a lot of our use of force incidents. And you'll see that year over year from the same period in 2019, looking at, for instance, dangerous weapon calls, we attended where use of force was required 72 relative to 40. Other call types of interest are robberies, where use of force was required went from 7 to 21. And that's not to suggest that robberies within this time period tripled necessarily over that of the previous reporting period, simply that during that reporting period, use of force response options were required. You can change slides again, please. The one thing you'll note in this, and when we look back and we reflect back on the first table that I reported, you will note in the report, in the presentation, there's a significantly higher level of use of force incidents relative to previous years. And for a large portion of that, that is simply due to procedural change that we made in 2020, which required that officers who simply withdrew a conducted energy weapon from their holster were required to produce a use of force report. That's covered in greater detail on the next slide. However, on this slide, with respect to firearms and other use of force options, the one thing that we did see with the introduction of conducted energy weapons is a significant decrease in the use of other secondary use of force options like OC or pepper spray and batons. Again, only 0.1% of all occurrences require use of force. And due to the small number, it's expected that incidents over time may fluctuate, and sometimes very significantly for reasons which defy systematic explanation. This is an example of the law of small numbers and the inherent volatility in those numbers, particularly when we're drawing from such a large data set as 146,000 occurrences. Jill, if we could move to the next slide, please. This breaks down in a little more detail conducted energy weapon use. And you notice sort of in the top line there, withdrawn only, we went from 2 to 106 from 2019 to 2020, and then pointed only from 60 to 105. The one thing you will note, though, is when you look at deployment of the conducted energy weapon, that's where the conducted energy weapon was actually utilized and probes were deployed. That number remains quite constant from 2016 to 2020. What we note is the conducted energy weapon is a very effective de-escalation technique. Simply the display of the conducted energy weapon will in large part change the individual's behavior such that further escalation use of force is not in fact required. And again, as I had indicated at the previous slide, the introduction of conducted energy weapons has driven the use of batons and OC spray down considerably. Moving to the next slide, a procedural change in 2020 requiring all incidents where CW probes were deployed. In fact, there were 19 for this reporting period. Procedurally, we required that those be reported as minor injuries, which wasn't the case, in fact, in the past. And this is what, in large part, in fact, in all part, contributes to the significant increase in minor injuries between 2019 and 2020. It's important as well, though, to point out that in the last 2 years, we have not discharged a firearm in any of our encounters with the public. And in fact, if you look back to as far back as the introduction of carbines to patrol, we have not utilized a carbine in service at any time. Moving to the next slide, please. This slide provides detail on subject race relative to use of force incidents. One of the things that the board asked for the last time we spoke is some enhancements to Appendix C. Appendix C outlines in relatively great detail each incident where a use of force report was in fact generated. Two things that the board asked for was that each of the incidents be itemized for easier reference, and to the greatest degree possible to provide additional information with respect to the occurrence type. So we've tried to provide as much information to you so that you can evaluate on your own terms and get a better understanding of why use of force was initiated in each of those instances. Though we are limited with respect to the amount of information we provide because it needs to be balanced by privacy interests. Use of force reports, as I indicated the last time, were not designed to collect data at the level intended for comprehensive analysis specific to subject race. However, that is the tool in which we're utilizing right now. I'll remind you as well that officers' perception of race may differ from officer to officer and may also differ from self-identified race. So you'll see in some circumstances in Appendix C that one particular individual may be identified as multiple races. We have a very small data set and a lack of historical data. And the challenge right now is what do we in fact compare that data to? A further comment on that with respect to future action. So in conclusion, despite the frequency of interaction with members of our community, again, 146,629 occurrences within that time period, very few, approximately 0.1% of these result in reportable incidents. Injuries to both subject and officer occurring during these incidents remains very low. And in fact, no long-term or lasting injuries were a result of police interaction in 2020. De-escalation training has been effective and will continue to be the cornerstone of officer intervention training. In 2021, we have enhanced officer intervention training with equity, inclusion, and diversity components. We've in fact included EID components in one of our in-service training scenarios. And in fact, we've also introduced the duty to intervene, where officers may find themselves in situations where they are working with other officers who may, whose actions may not fit the professionalism of our profession and our service, and the requirement for that officer to intervene in those situations. While the provincially mandated use of force report remains a valuable tool for analyzing officer actions, several deficiencies have been identified which limit comprehensive data analysis. Turning our thoughts towards future actions, as the chief had indicated, if you could move to the next slide, please, Jill. We will be providing this report to the board on a quarterly basis in this year. That will be coupled with future reporting incorporated into the WRPS race-based data collection strategy. I'm going to defer to my colleague, Kay Richardson, who will be updating the board on our efforts towards academic partnerships in this area. We've held extensive conversation in that regard. The Training Education Unit is working collaboratively with the Equity, Inclusion, Diversity team to ensure close alignment with principles and actions outlined in the WRPS Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Strategic Plan, including implicit bias awareness and Indigenous awareness training, which we completed last year and will be ongoing for our new members, and anti-racism training with emphasis on anti-Black racism training that will be delivered to our members in 2021. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and thank you very much to the board.
Thank you very much, Inspector Voucher. Are there any questions? Carl, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Edmund. Thanks, Jason, for that that update report. A couple of questions on the CEWs. How many officers in our service have them now? Is the first question, and the second question is, how often do they have to be updated or changed? I know the technology is always changing and getting updated, and just wondering about how often that would occur, or you may not even know, but those are my questions.
Yeah, I can answer that. All of our frontline officers in MSU Kiefer are provided with conducted energy weapons. So everyone on patrol is provided that device. All of our ERU, our ERT members are as well too. A number of our plainclothes units who may go out and conduct compliance checks and such, or may be involved in arresting individuals on warrant, are also supplied with that. Unlike a firearm where each individual member is provided a specific firearm for their general use, conducted energy weapons are utilized on a sort of a sign-in, sign-out basis as well too. The weapon itself is maintained and downloaded on a quarterly basis or after every time it's used, and it goes through its own internal dynamics and evaluation prior to each use. With respect to updated technology, we are using the X2 conducted energy weapon, which is there is one generation a little more advanced in that. It is either at the point of ministry approval or close to being that way as well too. From a life cycle perspective, the longevity of these is approximately 5 years. That said, they are fairly expensive item to obtain, an expensive item to train on and maintain as well too, just because of the cost of the cartridges and the batteries and such. That said, they are an incredibly effective weapon with respect to alternatives to other use of force options that may cause more permanent injury.
Thanks, Jason. I would agree with you that they are a very good investment. Thank you.
So Inspector Voucher, I don't see any other questions. Oh, Karen does. I have 2 as well, but Karen, go ahead.
Sorry, my hand went up quite late there. Thank you for the data. I think we've seen across, certainly since I've joined the board, just more and more information which helps inform decision making across, I think, all spectrums of the service, and I think that's incredibly helpful. I just have a quick question to make sure I understand this, because if I look at figure 1, which I think was on page 3 of your presentation, it looks like to me, if I look at the 2020 statistics, CAD occurrences are down and arrests are down, but use of force reports are up and incidents are up. So is it higher acuity than in the things that are happening in our community? I'm just trying to understand why the numbers for use of force just seem higher this year than last year.
Yeah, some of that, in fact, most of that, I would suggest, Missionary, has to do with a procedural change with respect to use of the conducted energy weapon as a displayed use of force option. Yeah. Use of force is a bit of a misnomer in the sense that we may demonstrate something within an encounter that actually isn't, in fact, utilized from a pure use of force perspective. We had some, I would consider some rather ambiguous language with respect to the conducted energy weapon being a displayed use of force option. In order to get rid of that ambiguity, every time an officer, in fact, withdraws that conducted energy weapon from their holster, they're required to complete a use of force report. So for the vast majority, that's driven that number up considerably higher. I think one of the things too, and I hate to speculate again, going back to the fact that these numbers are small and can be rather volatile, but we are seeing a bit of a change in landscape with respect to violent crime in our region as well too. And the response to that violent crime may initiate the need for escalated use of force options as well.
I assumed it might have been something like that because I remember past reports where that we certainly see the trend up in those numbers. So I wondered if it's just the types of crime sometimes we're seeing is becoming, more challenging for our officers to face when I look at that. So if I read figure 4, then which is the conducted energy weapon, where it isn't then that it's being drawn 104 more times than in 2019. We're changed how we're reporting the data. So it was an under reporting potentially into it's a bit like comparing apples to oranges is what I guess I'm asking there.
Yeah,
okay,
you're absolutely right.
That makes sense to me. Thank you.
And the withdrawal of the conducted energy weapon isn't required by the Policing Standards Act either. That is a procedural decision that we made because we want to be able to report back to you as a board this item because it is very expensive and we believe it's very effective. So we want to be very transparent in its use. and also to support its ongoing utilization by our members.
Well, and I commend the force for doing that, quite frankly, because that, leads to lots of questions from, the board and other people. And so I commend you for your transparency in terms of actually taking initiative to do something like that.
Thank you.
So, Inspector, I have to say you're very intuitive, because Karen's question was actually mine. So it is our police service that have decided that they will report a use of force every time a conductive energy weapon is pulled from the holster, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And in one, sorry.
That is not required by legislation. It's a decision that we made in the interest of transparency, and from an educational perspective as well too. Keep in mind, the use of force reports are intended to allow us to scrutinize the action of our members to ensure that they are in fact appropriate. And the more reporting that we can do with respect to that, the better job we're going to do at that level of oversight.
And the other question I had is the duty to intervene, because I think so often, and it doesn't matter if it's a police culture or, social workers or whoever, changing culture is a huge challenge. Can you just talk a little bit about the duty to intervene? Because it seems to me that is a cosmic shift on maybe how we previously had operated.
Yeah, it's a philosophical and cultural shift. So let me sort of set up a scenario whereby I'm an officer who's been on for 15 years, and I have an officer who may be on for just a matter of several months. There's going to be a bit of a power dynamic between the two of us. And if this officer that's been on for their own for a couple of months sees an officer that if I conduct myself in such a way that they see me as somebody that they look up to and they respect, yet in a way I don't act appropriately with respect to the law or our profession or exemplify the professionalism of our service, we want to make sure that that officer who is newly minted, may not have that same feeling that they have the same level of power that that other individual says, can intervene with me and tell me, Jason, listen, what you're doing is inappropriate, or I'll take it from here, and then we can address that later on. It gets back to, in a lot of ways, some of the challenges that we've seen out of incidents out of the United States, whereby the actions of an officer may have been inappropriate, but the question remains, what about the other officers that were standing around and perhaps didn't do anything? We have so many opportunities to protect our profession, protect the legitimacy of our profession. We want to make sure that all of our members understand that and will be supported in that. And that's why we introduced it right within our in-service training scenarios. So not only do we teach it academically, but they in fact have to apply it as well too.
I think your answer, Jason, and in that sort of refinement within Waterloo Regional Police Services really speaks to the questions that we had around the strategic planning, and that's how it gets implemented and how those values and that overarching strategic direction is implemented. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for a very informative report. I see no other questions. So on to Waterloo Regional Intelligence Notes 2020 Annual Report. Chief, do you want to introduce this?
Thanks. I'll just close up the annual use of force report and sort of bookend the comments. As you're aware, we took significant interactions last year to address community concerns. We did direct our procedure and policy team, and thanks to Margaret and her team for the duty to intervene and some of the work that we're doing, but also we're exceeding provincial standards. So you'll see consistently one of the things around our police board and our police service is we're exceeding adequacy standards across the province. And I think it's important to highlight that. I also want to thank Inspector Voucher and his team in our training and education unit for all the work they're doing. And Jason is doing some work on my behalf at the national level in partnership with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as we look at a national framework for use of force. I personally have always been troubled with the term use of force. It's really an intervention model. It's a public safety model. And the connotation that it's use of force really is actually doesn't tell or actually paint the entire picture. There's a lot of things we do where actually no application of force is made. So some good work happening, but I wanted to highlight the board that, again, our service is at the national level, sitting on working groups. So thanks for that, Jason and team, and I'll transition into intelligence notes, and I'm pleased to welcome Miss Margaret Glode along with Miss Denise Lowe. And again, this is a 2020 annual report of our intelligence notes that we're presenting to the board. So welcome, Margaret. Good to see you.
Thank you, Chief. As you know, the WRPS Regulated Interactions and Intelligence Notes procedure requires that a review is conducted quarterly on the entire regulated interactions database. We have also committed, WRPS has committed to also doing a quarterly review of the intelligence notes and sharing that both with the board and publicly. I am going to hand it over to Denise Lowe, who meticulously goes through this data and carefully tracks it and verifies it and puts it together in an understandable way. I did just want to make one other note before I hand it over to Denise. In the interest of transparency and our commitment to open data, as of this morning, we have also posted the 2020 data sets for both regulated interactions and intelligence notes on our external website. So all the data that is referenced in both this report and the regulated interactions report in the consent agenda is also now publicly available. This also, this race-based data collection will also be looking at how best to incorporate that into the overall service-wide race-based data collection strategy. So this is just a couple more components to that have been ongoing for some time now. So just with that background, I will hand it over to Denise to take you through some of the details in the report.
Hello, good afternoon.
Welcome, Denise.
Hi. I don't have video capabilities today. Oh, says I'm muted.
No, we can hear you, Denise. We just can't see you.
Oh, that's all right then. So I'm going to take you through the findings of the intelligence note report for any intelligence note that was generated between January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. So in 2020, officers completed 501 unique intelligence notes. This count reflects the number of times an officer initiated the intelligence note process. In total, the number of subjects recorded in intelligence notes was 819. And you'll recall that a subject can include persons, vehicles, businesses, locations, and addresses, etc. So the number of persons recorded in intelligence notes was 802 on 705 unique persons in 2020, of which 73 persons, or 10%, were subjects in more than one intelligence note. The maximum number of intelligence notes recorded on the same person in 2020 was 5, with 2 individuals falling into this category. Intelligence notes can be further divided into 4 categories, which are calls for service, citizen-generated, personal contact, and passive observations. And these 4 categories can be rolled into 2 broader categories, which are community-generated, which includes calls for service and citizen-generated, and police-generated, which are personal contact and passive observations. And you'll find in the report that the racial breakdown for both of those 2 categories are attached. By perceived gender, 600 persons were perceived as male, which accounts for 75% of all intelligence notes. By perceived race, persons who were perceived white accounted for 72% of all intelligence notes, followed by persons who were perceived as Black at 17% and Arab at 3%. Finally, by location, the top 5 intersections accounted for 17% of all intelligence notes. And you'll find that the table lists the top 5 intersections. And that concludes my summary of the Intelligence Note Annual Report.
Thank you very much, Denise. I see no questions. Chief, do you want to bookend this report?
Sure. Thanks so much, Chair Redmond. And, again, this is something we're actually the only police service in Ontario that is publicly reporting on intelligence notes. And there is a difference between regulated interactions. I feel compelled at times to remind individuals that there is a difference. With eloquence, Denise did describe what an intelligence note is. It's obviously broken down, but the regulated interaction, which is governed by provincial legislation, is about attempting to collect identifying information about an individual. And so that's when there's an attempt by one of our police officers to identify information by asking the individual in a face-to-face encounter to identify themselves. And provide information. And so that the difference with that versus the intelligence note, again, is the documentation of police officers' observations or information of persons and or activities for the purpose of intelligence gathering, as well as crime prevention. So there's a distinct difference, although from a policing perspective and from our perspective, and grateful for the board's support, that we do feel that there's continued importance to publicly report these. And really tying it into Mrs. Schnarr's comment, I think it actually speaks to larger systems approach to actually upstream prevention, looking at crime prevention, looking at actually changing the narrative in our community, as well as how do we actually allocate resources across the regional Waterloo. So again, this is our really, a couple of years into this, so our data sets are still small, but continue to grow. And when you think about it from a regional population, when you look at it, the overall impact on our population is quite minimal. Like this isn't something that is happening, in fact, every single day. It's part of an intelligence piece and a crime prevention piece, which our community, we believe, expects us to do. A lot of these are citizen generated and or investigative generated. So thanks to Denise from our
Chief, sorry, Ian does have a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ian.
Well, thank you, Chair Redmond. Actually, that was my question that the chief just addressed, which is, I don't know if it was in the middle of the 450 pages, but I was losing the strand on regulated interactions, intelligence notes, the use of force, and the race-based data collection. So that was a good overview. And I think it's important that we're going above and beyond what's mandated and should continue to do that. I think the public expects that. So no, that was my question. And thank you for answering it already, Chief.
So Chief, back over to you.
Thanks so much. And so again, this is an annual report, but we do come quarterly. And so we'll be seeing you once again in April. And special thanks to Margaret for her leadership, and Denise who pulls together much of our data sets behind the scenes and is working very closely on the race-based data collection strategy. And again, I want further to Margaret's point that we're very much committed to open data. And so all of this information and the actual tables are available on our website for the public to access. So some great work by our strat team. I'm going to keep moving through the agenda with your permission, Chair Redmond. And the next presentation ties the loop into several of the presentations you've seen today. It's a larger organizational strategy around race-based data collection. Our provincial government, through the Solicitor General's office, has mandated a series of, particularly around use of force, where we are collecting race-based data collection. But we're also working very collaboratively with the federal government and in particular Statistics Canada to look at a national race-based data collection strategy. Again, one of the challenges I think you've seen in all of the data sets is that when we don't have provincial and or national standards, it's very difficult for adequate comparison. We're basically looking at a fruit bowl with many different fruits, and it's not actually able to compare all of them similarly. So Again, I want to emphasize the work that is happening in the leadership of Ms. Kate Richardson and Ms. Margaret Gload and others in the organization. Were a large part of the provincial and national strategy. So this is an update from our previous presentation to give the board an update as to where we're at on our race-based collection strategy. So over to you, Kate, and welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you. I can start sharing my screen. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. So good morning, Chair Redmond, and good morning, members of the board. I'm going to provide a brief update from the meeting that we had in October, where we provided a very wide overview of the race-based data collection strategy, some of the data sets that we are collecting now, some of the legislation and regulation involved, as well as what is happening at a provincial and national level. We committed to coming back with an update and providing some timelines on some of our immediate next steps. What I was going to start to touch on, as my colleagues have already talked about this morning, we do the quarterly reportings to the board on regulated interactions, intelligence notes, and use of force. And as Marg noted, we share that information and data in a very open way with the public, as well as releasing these reports to the public. Since our updates in October, we've also started making some procedural changes to improve data quality, and that includes the police services broader data management strategy. During our last update in October, I talked about some key action items that need to go into forming a race-based data collection strategy so that we can have viable action plans, as well as inputs into our equity, inclusion, and diversity strategic plan and other initiatives of the service. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about those action items and where we're at this morning. So the race-based data collection will be based in Ontario's data standard for the identification and monitoring of systemic racism. Standards are very important in ensuring a very open, transparent, and accountable race-based data collection strategy. These are standards that were developed by the Anti-Racism Directorate for the province of Ontario, and they were also informed through consultation with the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner. This way we ensure, in following these standards, we uphold principles of do no harm to our stakeholders or our members, and we also ensure the privacy, security, and access where appropriate of the data. The chief mentioned this morning, scope of collection is further informed by work at the national level by the CACP and Statistics Canada for the collection of Indigenous and ethnocultural data and collection through the Uniform Crime Reporting Survey. So myself, Marg, others members of the service have been informing the national efforts for that collection. The proposal currently includes a collection of victim and accused data. Self-reported collection from victims and accused persons is being considered, as well as perception-based data that is collected by officers. Timelines for this initiative will include a broad stakeholder engagement starting this month and into April. We have been identifying stakeholders from various groups, including victim support groups and advocacy groups for the Statistics Canada to consider as part of their consultation. We will also be providing a submission to support that initiative. With the rollout of data collection at a national level, we'll include more member training on the data collection, which is targeted for November and December of this year. And the plan is to roll it out by the end of the year so that collection can start as of January the 1st. And those timelines are, of course, subject to the work of Stats Canada and decision-making by the CACP. In support of the race-based data collection strategy, our training and education branch and equity, inclusion, and diversity office have developed and are rolling out systemic racism and anti-Black racism training. The curriculum has been developed with local stakeholders and will be piloted in our police service before first being rolled out in March. And an e-learning module, and then we'll continue from June to December with in-class sessions for this year. We have been talking with several academics as well as other stakeholders to inform our academic partnership, as Inspector Boucher mentioned this morning, as well as exploring opportunities for grant funding that may be available from the federal government. With that advice and input, we are developing an open call for academic partnership proposals that we are developing now with a target of releasing that in the spring of this year so that we have a partnership in place and can start doing the work later this year. With that academic strategy, we have objectives that will include engagement with our stakeholder community, including those with lived experience, to do a qualitative and quantitative analysis of the data and the feedback we get from our partners. Another objective that is key to success is the engagement of our members as well, who provide not only practical experience, but also lived experiences and operational context to the data and stakeholder feedback that will be analyzed. So these two components of the strategy are working in partnership together. To ensure that we have good quality of data, integrity and validity of data, we are looking to expand the Equity, Inclusion and Diversity Office and are developing a data analyst role to work specifically on the strategy, on the academic partnership, and continue to work in providing quarterly updates and open data with our race-based data collection for around the spring 2021 timeline. And a communication and engagement strategy will also be part of the work that the academic partner does with our data analysts and our members to build on what's already happening in terms of open communication of that race-based data. In terms of next steps, we will be further informing the Stats Canada submission, releasing a call for proposal, and working to further flesh out and post the academic partnership. And with that, I will conclude my presentation and stop my share, and I will turn it back over to the chief for to invite any questions of the board.
So thank you, Kate. Sorry, Chief, are there any, I don't see any questions. Chief, do you want to make some comments? I have two questions, but, oh, Tony does too.
Go ahead, Chair Redmond. I'll make some closing comments.
Okay, Tony, go ahead.
I was just, through you, Madam Chair, just wondering, this data, I know it's being shared with CACP and Statistics Canada. Is there any insights on how this data is being used more holistically across other organizations within Canada to have a deeper understanding of what's happening or where we are today? I don't know who can answer that question.
Go ahead, Kate, from the Stats Canada perspective. Please provide your thoughts and insight into what we're trying to accomplish as a profession.
So Stats Canada and the National Collection is really getting a good understanding of those race-based indicators across the country, so from all police services in different provinces. Some of the challenges with that collection will be the different regulation that happens in individual provinces in terms of what is required to be collected, as well as how that information gets shared. It will be shared through the Uniform Crime Reporting Survey, so that data will be made available and public. I think as part of our submissions, we will also be providing just some input around what type of understanding for these data sets needs to come with their use. So they're not going to necessarily on their own provide good insights into systemic discrimination and racism and what needs to be done in different sectors, but it will be available to academics, other experts to use so that they can inform those types of studies.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
So Kate, I had two quick questions. One is, I really commend the stakeholder engagement with people with lived experience, because to me that gives it the credibility and the validity that we need going forward. So I think that's terrific. Really glad to hear that. You talked about a proposed accused being captured in this data. And I'm just curious, like, would they be part of the intelligence notes, or would they be captured in any other way?
So with the national initiative, whenever there is an offense as part of our reporting for the Uniform Crime Survey, we would be capturing race as part of that. So it'd be both race of the accused as well as what's being currently proposed, because it's all still very subject to consultation. Any information belonging to victims or perhaps other parties. Right now, it's just scoped for accused and victims. Okay. In which case that information would be provided to Stats Canada as part of our annual reporting, along with other police services across the country.
Thank you for that clarification. Chief, over to you.
Well, thanks, Chair Edmund, and thanks so much, Kate and team that is working on this. I know that Mark, Shirley, and I are immensely proud of the work that we've been doing. Again, want to highlight that we're at the national level as a part of this steering committee and providing feedback. And I think that the importance of this in our profession is getting it right, getting the data analysis, data collection, and all those different processes within our current envelope of the current operating budget. We believe that it's important to have a data analyst that is working within strategic services to provide that lens around race-based data collection. So we have one dedicated person. And I think really to Mr. Giovananzo's point, there's a larger community discussion around data collection. So many of our systems intersect. And so if we truly want to move upstream, how do we share all the data? How do we look at different approaches to actually address root causes of crime, look at upstream prevention? When we look at the most recent federal announcement with federal dollars flowing into an investment of youth, particularly aimed at curbing gun violence, how do we actually look at that and work with our community partners, and how can our data shape some of those decision-making and evidence-based pieces? So it's a very exciting project. It's not without anxiety and trepidation and fear as we go down this road, but one that I'm very excited about. So we'll continue to keep the board updated. I'll work with Ms. Eggleton to once again bring this back to the board as a status update as we make a series of progressions. You can see our timeline is there. We have a very specific piece, and of course, as a part of the strategic business plan, data quality and data management is one of our key goals as we're moving forward. So great work, and thanks, Kate and team, for your great leadership.
Thank you.
So Waterloo WRPS corporate communications strategy. Chief, over to you.
Thanks, Chair Edmund. We're on the home stretch as we roll down this. Person needs no introduction, but pleased to welcome Ms. Sherry Greeno, our Manager of Corporate Communications, to provide an update on our corporate communication strategy. It's an update as well as the work that we've been doing. And this was really tied to a series of inquiries from the board as to how do we actually share information, how do we connect with our various community partners, how do we share information internally. We had a significant insight into internal communication as a part of our internal surveying. So pleased to welcome Sherry, again, who needs no introduction, but over to you, Ms. Greeno. Welcome.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair Redmond and members of the board for the opportunity to present this brief update on our corporate communication strategy. To begin, I just want to walk you quickly to introduce you, I guess, virtually to our team. There's myself as a manager. We have two public information officers, Constable Dietrich and Constable Johnson, who really act as the face of the service and deal with all of the day-to-day media inquiries, which you probably can understand can be quite overwhelming some days. Jennifer Conductive is new to our team within the last year. She is our corporate communications coordinator in charge of things like our social media campaigns, our newsletters, and our website content. Mark Arugio is the genius behind all of the videos that you see internally and externally that we produce, and also in charge of our branding. We also have Catherine Conaboy, who is our special events coordinator. So as you can see, we're small, but I always like to say we're mighty, in charge of several roles that you can see here within the service. And in 2019, the team really came together with a vision to create the service's first ever corporate communication strategy. And in fact, as far as we know at that time, we were the first police service to do so in Ontario. And as members of the corporate communication team, we obviously recognize the importance of effective communication to the success of this organization. So we outlined several goals and objectives that we wanted to do to provide a more strategic and coordinated approach to our communication not only internally, but externally as well. Internally, one of the goals that we've accomplished is the implementation of some new software and technology. In 2020, we invested in an email marketing tool that allowed us to create the service's first ever weekly newsletter, which after much debate and back and forth, we ended up settling on the name WRPS Express. We launched this in May 2020 to ensure our members were up to date on all the services initiatives. Our news releases are in there, campaigns, procedures, policy updates. There's also a section entitled Your Community Thanks You, where we're able to put in all of the messages and notes that we get from the public to show our members just how valued they are. It also has a section for member feedback, so they're able to offer us any suggestions and ideas that they may have. We're also focused on updating our At Your Service intranet, knowing that this is the most popular communication medium for our members to date. Unfortunately, we only installed the analytics tool in 2019, so we don't have any comparison data. But we do know that in the last year, in 2020, members visited the internet more than 750,000 times, and that the news section on the homepage was one of the most viewed areas. We also develop monthly chief videos that are distributed in our Express and on the intranet. We have also developed an in-service media training course for our members, and that's to prepare them in the event we may ever need them for a spokesperson, but also so that they can actually see the importance of providing timely and accurate information through our office so that we can get that out internally as well as externally. We also updated our media relations and social media procedures, and we maintain a good presence on provincial, national, and international committees. Through the OACP, all of our members in corporate comms are part of OMRON, which is Ontario Media Relations Officers Network. And I vice chair that committee, and as part of that, we're often called upon by other services to provide media training, as well as social media training, key messages. And we're also helping a few services currently create their own corporate communication strategy. In 2020, we also looked at how we could modernize the bulletin style of communication within the service. And we decided on the installation of 11 TV monitors throughout the facilities. They have been placed in high traffic areas where they'll be well seen by members. They're currently being tested now, and we hope to have all the members of corporate comms trained in the software within the next month. We're also looking at putting sign holders in facility washrooms that can be easily replaced with information posters on service initiatives and updates. And we're also looking at reorganizing and modernizing the news and announcement flows that go in internally. Also looking at modernizing some internal special events. As you can appreciate, 2020 wasn't a great year for special events internally or externally, so we're looking forward to changing that up in the future. We're also looking at developing a podcast that goes behind the scenes and highlights our members, as well as we currently have an ongoing member profile campaign both internally and externally. Externally now for communications, we are obviously constantly looking for ways to increase communication and engagement with the public. In 2020, we published external newsletter, also called WRPS Express. And this actually gets sent directly to an individual's email. So they don't have to go online to look at it. They can subscribe and get it sent right to their email. We currently have 691 contacts, average open rate of 67%. We are looking at possibly doing this twice a month as opposed to once a month as it currently is. And we'll continue to advertise in the hopes of gaining more contacts in the future. Social media, everyone's best friend, remains one of the most popular ways of delivering information for us, and it's growing on a daily basis. We really started using social media about 4 years ago. The organization had a Twitter account. It wasn't really used on a regular basis and had about 20,000 followers. So we really started focusing our communication efforts on that platform, as well as we enlisted other platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And as you can see, we have almost 160,000 followers to date. So it is quite popular for us. And in 2020, we did invest in a social media management tool, which allows us to have an annual calendar, allows us to schedule posts. And my favorite part of it is the analytics that we're able to capture from it. So as you can see here, Compared to 2019, all of our areas have increased. In terms of posts published, we have 5,000 in 2020. We gained 20,000 new followers. We had 4.4 million total engagements and 61.5 million total impressions. And if you're not sure what engagements and impressions are, it can just be broken down into engagements are when people engage with us. So whether they click on the post, whether they like it or share it, and impressions would be how many times your post actually showed up in someone's feed. And we know while social media does continue to grow, we do know that there's a population that may not want to go on social media, and we definitely understand that. So we wanted to focus also on updating our external website to make it more subscriber-based, meaning people can now subscribe to all of our news releases. They can subscribe to our major incidents, our daily incidents, as well as our current traffic incidents. So if they don't want to go online, they don't have to. This can get sent directly to their email. We also updated the site to include a translation function, which means the content of our website can now be translated into 109 different languages. And a couple other interesting stats that we were able to gather from the website include the fact that when you compare it to 2019, more people are searching now for freedom of information, as well as business plans and statistics. So that's information we're going to take forward as we update our plan for the future. As well, we also were able to determine that mobile devices are the primary and increasing way people are accessing our site. Externally, we also continue with WRPS Talks, which are interactive live talks with the chief. He goes live with the community and they're able to ask questions in real time. We also have media roundtables throughout the year where media are invited to have coffee with the chief and ask any questions that they like. We also have the chief committed to monthly traditional media briefings on radio and TV. So taking the analytics from our website that show the majority of visitors are actually accessing it from their phones and their mobile devices, we decided to invest in a WRPS app. We're very excited about this. It's currently in development and it will display a lot of features that are currently available on our website, such as online reporting, recruiting, safety tips, and regular news updates, but they'll be able to get it straight to their phone no matter where they are. As well, we continue with our social media campaigns. We're working with equity, inclusion, and diversity on campaigns and an updated event calendar. Also, as I mentioned before, developing in-house media training for our members to highlight the expectations and the importance of communication through our office, and as well, continuing with our member profiles. So I realize that's a lot of stuff in a very short time, but we are very proud of the work that has been accomplished to date in our office. But we do recognize that there is more work that needs to be done. We know internally, based on a recent survey, 81% of the members are overall satisfied with internal communications, but there's still 58% that say they are not able to get the information that they need. So moving forward, we're going to take a deeper look at that survey and look at making improvements to those numbers. Externally, we know from recent feedback from focus groups and from interaction with residents that they say they want more and they want it in several different ways. So suggestions from younger people are saying that they want to see more social media and digital-based communication. Other people want to see more traditional forms. So brochures, pamphlets, one-on-one interactions such as workshops or videos, workshops or town halls. So we do recognize that there are audience that we may not be reaching, whether technology is a barrier. So we want to make sure that any future communication efforts are focused on getting information out to those individuals. As well, we're constantly attempting to find new, innovative ways to tell our story here at WRPS and to let the public know what our members are doing every day, the calls that they respond to, the investigations that are underway. We are consistently using every medium that is available to us, and we're releasing as much information as possible. Sometimes, of course, this is limited in order to protect the integrity of an investigation if we can't put out certain information. But also the message can be limited because sometimes we tend to be at the mercy of media outlets and what they decide to pick up from us and actually put out on those traditional mediums. So as we move forward, we're going to continue to balance modern, traditional, and we're working on updating our 2021 to 2023 communication strategy, and we'll be happy to come back with an update on that in the future.
Thank you, Sherry. That was a quick run through and almost exhausting when you look at all the things you're doing with such a small team. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm always interested in communications. The last slide that you showed us that talked about the 42% of individuals internally not able to find the information that they want. Were you able to determine whether it was a content problem, like that the information just wasn't there, or a navigation problem where they just didn't know it was there, but they didn't know where to find it?
Do you want me to answer that, or?
Sherry, do you want to go ahead? Sure.
Sure. I would say definitely navigation from what I read in the comments from the survey. Some of them actually indicated that there were too many avenues to go to for communication, so they weren't sure where to go for that. So we're going to be delving more into those findings and trying to determine whether there's one main place to go for information, or if we can somehow sort that out and make it easier for the members.
I think it's a challenge, because we see this all the time at Laurier with students. I mean, all of the information is there. It's there in multiple places, but it's just sometimes not the easiest system to try and figure out, where it is in a timely manner. So that sounds great.
Yep, I agree.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members? Again, thank you, Sherry, for all of this and what you do with as a community partner. I know that you're very busy in other initiatives, and the community is a beneficiary of your expertise and your skill. Chief, over to you. Do you want to tie this up in a bow?
Yeah, no, just want to thank the board. Obviously, under the Police Services Act, the service and the board are mandated to have a media relations procedure and a media relations unit. So this is a mandated adequacy piece. We certainly have grown under Ms. Greeno's leadership, the work that we're doing, as well as the entire team, with the addition of a graphic analyst, a media coordinator, as well as our 2 public information officers. As part of the realignment within our service, we will be adding a 3rd public information officer this year, which will allow us to expand our support of media inquiries. So we'll be able to provide also some support on weekends, which is a key piece and a key commentary from our media. So we continue to see growth in this area. Clearly, I think from our town hall sessions, I think one of the things I heard consistently was communication, which leads to the whole relationship piece. And we also need to look at traditional and non-traditional means. Although social media is a very popular piece, it's a particular segment of the population, and there's others that don't access it, and there's other methods to do that. So very grateful for the great work of Sherry and her team. And also, again, I want to highlight, I'm immensely proud. Sherry is leading provincially as a vice chair of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police Ontario Media Officer Network. And I think you can see the consistent trend that our members and our leaders are working both provincially and nationally. So with that, I'll maybe slide right into my final comments on this marathon agenda. And I'll be extremely brief, which could be very challenging for me. I just actually want to pause it and reflect. If we look at the current agenda today, through consent and through presentation, our organization presented the board 20 operational reports on what's happening in policing. And I think that, it's simply amazing when you look at the complexity of our profession and all the different things that we have going on. There's lots of action, there's lots of initiatives. And I still believe that 2021, we're still facing the challenges of the current global pandemic, as well as the social climate and the demand for evolution and change in society in all systems. But I think what is reflected today is our commitment as an organization, our commitment as a team, and our commitment in partnership with the board that we're up for the challenge, that we view this as an opportunity, and we've actually seized the opportunity to make change. Naturally, it may not be fast enough for some of our citizens and for some of our community, and even internally for our members. But the reality is we are actioning, we are evolving, and we're engaged both provincially and nationally in significant policy discussions around policing. And so I'm very excited about that. One of the reports that was in consent based on agenda timing, et cetera, was even our information technology procedure, where again, we're leading in how we actually govern the use of technology within policing, and how we've recommended provincially that the launch of a provincial working group to work with all stakeholders, to all government partners, and in particular to engage the Information Privacy Commissioner in dialogue. These are significant pieces that our service is leading on, and I'm immensely proud of that. And I just want to set the context as we head into March. It will hard to believe that we'll be really into the first quarter of 2021, and the board can anticipate some financial updates as we finalize and audit our 2020 budget position, which is looking to be very positive from a variance perspective. A lot of mitigation, a lot of work going into managing the 2020 operational budget based on the global pandemic, pending financial challenges within the region, as well as a larger discussion about policing in Waterloo region. At the same time as we'll be presenting and updating on our 2020 audited financial statements, we'll also be in the month of March launching our 2022 operating capital budget process. And it's hard to imagine. It feels like we just finished one. But again, getting into the deep dive discussion around who we are, what we're doing, what services are we providing, how can we do business differently, and how do we continue to provide effective, adequate services while managing what I believe will continue to be a very challenged economic climate for municipalities. And so we're setting the context. So that will be coming in March. Obviously, I do want to also recognize that March traditionally does have a special day of celebration, which is particularly special in my heritage and my background. But Superintendent Bursey and Superintendent Goodman and our major events team is working with all the stakeholders and partners to ensure that we're able and ready to manage any particular events in March as we move forward. And again, so lots of amazing things happening. I do want to take a moment to once again thank the board for your leadership, your sage guidance and wisdom, as well as recognize our leadership team that is on the call today. They do amazing work every single day to continue to keep our members safe, to drive change and energy. So look forward to the month of March, and thanks for your amazing attention today in a massive, probably largest, I'm going to say probably the largest package of the year, I'm hoping. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief. And it's funny, a month hence and then a year ago was the day that the province declared a state of emergency because of the pandemic. And I had the opportunity to thank the Premier the following day and the Minister of Health and commend them on their timing. So it will be indelibly, printed in my brain forever. I just want to say that the 500 plus pages that one of our board members commented on was a lot of weighing through, and I commend all of you for your commitment and your attention to detail. But those reports had to be generated by an outstanding staff, and it does reflect the vision and the activity of this police service on behalf of the 630,000 people that you serve. So thank you all very much. It was a long and very interesting meeting. Is there any new business? Any future business agenda items? Once we are adjourned, members of the media are welcome to log into Zoom on the login details. I think some of you are already in. And Chief Larkin and I will be able to take questions at that point in time. And at this point in time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Tony, seconded by Rosita. All those in favor? Thank you all for a very profitable meeting.